Hey there, friends and enemies. JoPa here again, and the First Descendant beta has come and gone. I wanted to give my review, some pros, some cons, all the things that I loved and maybe didn't love as much, things I'm excited about for the full release of the game, which is hopefully coming next year in 2023. But I do think the developers have some work to do, and I'm really cautiously optimistic. That's one word or one phrase that I would say perfectly sums up how I'm feeling about the game, because there were some things in this game that I love, that I think are great. From the cutscenes being beautiful, the characters, the variety of abilities, the amount of characters that are available right from the very beginning, all with their own unique skills and such. I think that's really cool. I love that. It gives a lot of variety. It'll be nice once the game is started and you have to unlock those characters yourself to see all the different characters, like a Yesa, then a bunny, then a, you know what I'm saying, like all of them out in the wild. And it seems like there's going to be even more added over the course of time, which I think is really, really cool. One thing I will say about that, though, is I would love to see my Viesa play a little bit different than someone else's. So what I mean by that is not necessarily different skills, because obviously the skills are set to the character, but I would like to see runes or weapons or other items that synergize really, really well with a character. So, for example, if you have a gun that really works well with a certain ability and buffs that or adds an effect or anything like that, so that way if I'm using this specific weapon and someone else is using a different one, our characters will play a bit differently, and it's not like all the characters. If we're playing both playing Ajax, our characters are going to feel like clones of each other with no differences besides the stats. So that's something that I hope to see going forward. However, even without that, I do feel like the variety of characters, once we have the full roster unlocked, will be nice and will allow for a wide range of play styles, and you can level up each character individually and get the different skills, all that kind of good stuff. So for that reason, I think there's a lot of potential there for variety, especially with different weapons and such. The gunplay, I thought, wasn't terrible. It was wild that it felt better at hip firing, especially on controller, because oftentimes what would happen is if I would ADS, the aim assist or whatever was happening would get stuck on a certain character. So that was kind of a bummer. So sometimes I'd be looking at an enemy, I'd shoot him, and then I wouldn't be able to move my reticle to the next enemy. And it was a bit of a pain, but I'm hopeful that that'll get sorted out. Oh, Outriders had some similar issues during their beta, and they resolved those fairly quickly. So I'm hopeful. The variety of guns was pretty cool for a beta. That's one thing I think a lot of people need to keep in mind. This was a beta, and they actually included a lot more content than other betas that I've seen for the most part. It wasn't like, okay, you get one mission, you get this, you get that. We got a bunch of different missions, a couple different locations. We got boss fights, we got a few different characters. So there was a lot there to check out, which I think bodes well for the full release of the game, especially if the game is not going to be released in like January or February. I think if you give this game a little bit more time and you're looking at 4 to 6 months from now, the full release, then they can do a lot more with the polish and everything there. So the locations were solid, not spectacular. I did enjoy the boss fights, but I would love to see more boss fights out in the open. However, I did see some like horde mode activities out in the wild that I thought were very interesting, and something like that could be really cool, especially if they're solid rewards. Because the first time I saw it, I was lower level and I'm jumping in, and these enemies are super tanky. But I had some people there that I was with that were higher level than me, taking care of this pretty easily. It's just the only problem I had, and then, again, I don't have a high end PC, but the game did stutter, lag. The graphics dropped noticeably as we got into content with a lot more enemies and a lot more allies around, like a lot of abilities being used. So that's one thing that I hope they sort out as well, because I feel like there's a lot of the game can be beautiful at its peak state. The problem is you don't want, if it dips too low too often, then that's what the game is. You know what I'm saying? That's what everyone's going to look at with the game. Okay, this game doesn't live up to performance expectations. But again, it's a free to play game. This is a free to play looter shooters are games that are going to naturally improve over time if they're given a bit more uh, love from the developers and allowed to expand and grow. So I think that's something to keep in mind. Destiny 2, Warframe, Outriders, even as a DLC model, but especially like the Division, all of those games grow and get better over time. You look at Avengers and Fallout 76, those games are significantly better now than when they first launched. So, as a free to play game, I think it's a little bit more palatable when you jump into a game. You're like, I can have fun with this game for a while, go and leave it alone as they update, and then you come back and all of a sudden there's a bunch of new content. So talking about the content, the missions were a little bit repetitive. The voice lines were okay. I'm hopeful that it's going to be more variety, less annoyance with some of the voice lines, like reloading consistently. So that's a real hope of mine personally. And then we have the boss fights, which I really enjoyed the boss fights. I think there needs to be more variety of how you take on the bosses, not just shoot a certain weak point, break that off, and then do a bunch of damage. More mechanics will be good. But hopefully, as we see more and more bosses, that's what's going to happen. Because again, this is just a beta. We didn't see the full wide range of stuff. And again, endgame cannot be just reliant on these bosses. There's got to be multiple approaches to endgame for a game like this to be successful, in my personal opinion. One of the things about Destiny, there's especially the first couple of years of Destiny, you got raids, you've got nightfalls, you've got PvP. Games that don't have PvP have to add additional layers to the end game to give people reasons to use the characters that they've leveled up. If I have a character that's max level and I have nothing to challenge that character with, there's going to be a little bit of an issue in the game because I'm not really, once I get to max level, I'm like, okay, now I'm done. And luckily with all the different characters, that means there's going to be, you're getting those characters to max level is definitely going to take some time, but it's just something to keep in mind for the developers. Like, I think there's a lot there that, a lot of potential with this game. I think if you add a true horde mode, if you have these boss fights, if you make some open world boss fights, if you have dungeons or raids or strikes, whatever you want to call them, and they're longer, harder missions with bosses at the end or mechanics or puzzles, whatever the case may be, I think all of that will suit this game very well, and I think the potential is there. By and large, I am very excited about this game. Like I said, cautiously optimistic up front because I do think there are some things that could potentially hold this game back. But as a new looter shooter developer, I think they've done a really good job of adding content, having a beta with a lot of depth there, which is good. We'll just have to see how much of that. If this beta is like the majority of the actual game, that could be a real problem because that means a lot of people are not going to stick around for a long time. We're also going to have to wait and see the grindiness of unlocking characters versus like purchasing them. So if it takes 100 hours to unlock a single character, that will also be a bit of an issue. And it's got to be paths to various characters, some harder than others, obviously. So we'll see how that goes. And either way, I'm excited. I'll definitely be covering the game in depth as it moves forward to launch, as it moves from the beta into the next phase, which I think we're going to be hearing more about what's to come from the game here shortly. Maybe hopefully get a release date soon. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you want to see more of the First Descendant content from me, subscribe to the channel. It helps me out tremendously. I'm going to definitely be covering this game, as well as all your favorite looters that are out there. But my name is JoPa. I hope you have a good one, and I'll catch you all later.